Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're jumping straight into a critical comparative briefing for policymakers. We're looking at exactly why traditional health programs fail and why sovereign infrastructure is literally the only financially sustainable path forward. We are talking about a fundamental shift in how African healthcare is financed and delivered. Here is our roadmap for today. We'll breeze through the 4 systemic program failures, look at the real cost of inefficiency, and then explore the infrastructure-first solution, the 5 interconnected care networks, financial rails with data sovereignty, and we'll wrap up with SDG 9 and sustainable revenue.
All right, part 1, the 4 systemic program failures, or what's really the architecture of collapse. So what actually happens across the continent when external funding cycles just end? Well, care simply stops. Look at these real-world consequences. In East Africa, a well-run clinic quietly closed its doors in 2025 just because a 5-year funding cycle wrapped up, leaving previously managed patients completely on their own. Over in West Africa, an audit revealed massive administrative leakage. Why? Because that program was built to satisfy donor compliance rather than focusing on patient outcomes. Down in Southern Africa, we saw a whole decade of vital community health data extracted and locked up on foreign servers, making it entirely inaccessible to the local Ministry of Health. And in the Sahel, maternal mortality actually rose simply because a donor-funded supply chain program came to a halt. You see, these aren't isolated accidents. They are highly predictable systemic flaws.
Moving on to part 2, let's talk about the cost of all this inefficiency. It's a true mathematical urgency. Get this. According to the Africa CDC, up to 40% of African health spending is lost annually. 40%! Where does it all go? It's vanishing into fragmented planning, duplicative delivery, and financial leakage at transfer points. Almost half of the money injected into the system basically evaporates before it can heal a single patient. And the World Bank paints an even grimmer picture. To put things into perspective, for every single dollar of health aid dispersed to sub-Saharan Africa, between 20 and 40 cents is completely absorbed by administrative overhead before ever reaching the intended beneficiary. No amount of tweaking or better program design has been able to fix this structural trap.
So the crucial takeaway here is this direct contrast: programs versus infrastructure. Programs are fragile, they're temporary. They build a user base for a short burst of time and then totally fragment when the funding inevitably wanes. Infrastructure, on the other hand, is a permanent foundation. It adapts, it scales as it grows, and most importantly, it secures sovereign ownership of the healthcare system. You can't just switch it off.
Which brings us to Section 3, the definitive infrastructure first solution, the AfriFarm Care Grid. Now, AfriFarm Health is not just another app or some digital marketplace. It is a full-stack, AI-powered healthcare operating system built entirely on supply-side infrastructure. Think of it as this shared digital layer that finally connects all the existing fragmented pieces of healthcare across both borders and trust boundaries. I absolutely love this quote because it really anchors our briefing. We did not build a tool to disrupt healthcare. We built the infrastructure healthcare has been missing. Instead of trying to disrupt an already fragile system, AfriFarm Health is laying down the permanent grid that future services can plug directly into.
Okay, Section 4. Let's pop the hood and look at the operational engine, the 5 interconnected care networks.
The system uniquely unifies these 5 distinct networks, ensuring there are absolutely no dead ends or drops in the patient journey. You've got the Hospital Partner Network, or HPN, for advanced critical escalation. The Emergency Partner Network, for rapid response when every single second matters. The Pharmacy Partner Network handles last-mile medication access. Then there's the Virtual Care Network for immediate remote clinical interaction. And finally, the Home Care Network for continuous recovery. No competitor has unified all 5 of these into a single cohesive operating system. So how does this actually work in practice? It forms what we call a continuous intelligent care loop. A patient enters the system through an AI triage layer. That AI then intelligently routes them to the exact right network. Maybe that's a virtual consult, or maybe it's the immediate dispatch of an ambulance. If things get serious, they're seamlessly escalated to a hospital. Afterward, home care steps in to manage the recovery. Every single touch point is connected, meaning the patient never falls through the cracks, and it leads right up to frictionless, guaranteed payment across all those networks. This flows perfectly into Section 5, financial rails and data sovereignty.
the real connective tissue of the whole operation. Because let's be real, care only works if payment and trust work. This robust financial infrastructure solves cross-border pricing and literally guarantees income for providers. It takes all that traditional administrative waste we saw in legacy programs and converts it into efficient care delivery. Think about a guy in London who needs to pay for his mother's consultation, her medication, and a home nurse back in Ghana. Through this infrastructure, he does it instantly, in multi-currency, with zero friction. And those local providers? They are guaranteed their settlement through escrow. And then there's data. Remember that failure in Southern Africa we discussed earlier? Well, this grid directly addresses that by ensuring African health data remains completely sovereign. It is locally owned and governed by Africa. Instead of external programs extracting health data just to publish academic papers abroad, the care grid utilizes patient-controlled, interoperable vaults. This builds a continental evidence base that is actually owned and utilized by African healthcare ministries to solve African problems.
Finally, let's wrap up with Section 6, SDG 9 and Sustainable Revenue, the architecture of the future. When you build an infrastructure-first system, resilience and accountability are embedded by design, which directly fulfills global mandates like SDG 9. It hits Target 9.1 by outlasting fragile political donor cycles. It hits 9.3 by linking local, community-level SMEs, like pharmacies and home care workers, right into formal verified payment rails. It tackles 9.4 by structurally eliminating that massive financial leakage we talked about earlier, and it powers 9.5 through sovereign, real-time data ownership.
And here is the real game changer. Instead of constantly burning through temporary budgets, this infrastructure literally pays for itself as it scales. It establishes financially sustainable revenue streams at every single clinical touchpoint. Whether it's a pharmacy transaction fee, virtual consultation revenue, or margins on those cross-border financial rails, the grid generates its own capital. It simply doesn't need to go begging for a replenished budget every 5 years just to keep the lights on.
It all boils down to this fundamental truth about African healthcare financing. The money has always been there. The infrastructure to use it hasn't. The capital hasn't been missing. What's been missing is the ability to use that capital transparently, accountably, and permanently. So the big question for policymakers is clear. Are we going to keep pouring money into fragile programs that inevitably disappear? Or are we finally ready to commit to the permanent sovereign infrastructure that will secure healthcare for generations? It's a structural decision. And honestly, it's the only one that ensures when someone gets sick, the system is actually there to catch them, today, tomorrow, and decades from now. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep thinking big, and I'll see you in the next one.